Okay, so let's get the dough together. If you've seen my other videos on putting pizza dough together, this is really almost the exact same process. The biggest difference with the Chicago style pizza is that we have a few more ingredients, and that's because we're doing that kind of cornbread crust as opposed to just the really simple water, flour, yeast, salt kind of equation. So I'm gonna go in with my water to start. And then we'll let that yeast float for just a second. And again, if that's nice kind of, quick acting instant yeast, stuff that is relatively fresh, you should be able to start to smell that coming up. And so once you can start to smell that yeast coming up, you want to add your sugar, right? And you want to make sure this is sugar and not salt, because as we've said, salt can literally kill the yeast if you put it in too quickly. So let that do its thing for just a second. And then we're gonna add our olive oil. Get every little bit of olive oil out of there. We're ready to go in with about half of the flour. And we'll stir that until it gets to be about like pancake batter. And then I'll go in with the second half of my flour. Stir, stir, stir a little bit. Okay, then I'll go in with my cornmeal. And last but not least, some salt. And then I'll stir this all around until it gets us that kind of shaggy mass that we see in a lot of these pizza recipes, right? So you've got these kinds of flakes of dough starting to emerge. And once you get that kind of ready so that this flour is coming up off the sides of that bowl, you dump it down onto your work surface. Scraping out everything from that bowl. And then I take my bench scrape, or just my hands, and I start kneading, right? And getting that dough together, getting it all into one mass. And you can see this is a great big dough ball because you've got 4 cups of flour in there. And so I'm just gonna work it like this. And as I've said in other videos, the butt of the hand, right? So you don't wanna get your fingers into this, otherwise you're gonna have a big mess literally on your hands. Okay, so I'm about to a place where I'm comfortable, I think, kind of kneading that with my own 2 hands. So I'm just gonna work this dough. And as I'm kind of working around the edges, butt of the hands, you notice there's still some flour kind of coming up and cornmeal hanging out on my work surface. So as I'm sort of kneading this around, I'm just gonna try to kind of pick up as much of that as possible. Use my dough ball, I don't know, like a little Zoom bot or whatever those are, those Roombas, that's what they are. Anyway, so I'm Roomba-ing up my little pieces of stray flour on my work surface. And then we're gonna knead like this for about 5 to 7 minutes until that dough is nice and smooth. And we'll come back and look at what it looks like at that point, okay? Whew, that is a workout. This dough will give you some pretty serious shoulders because it is kind of, it's a tough, it can be a tough kind of dough, or at least tougher than a lot of other sorts of pizza doughs. I actually found myself adding a little bit of water to this to sort of soften it up. And so you want to keep your eye on that with your Chicago style pizza doughs. It's a similar kind of process to checking these with the way that you would check them with a lot of other pizzas. So you want this smooth sort of outer shell, and then when you press into it, you want to make sure that that kind of little hole stays. That's how you can tell that those protein strands inside of there are nice and springy. and that you've got a dough that is going to really bounce back and give you some nice kind of pockets. So from here, the process is really simple. We're just going to plunk it into our bowl. Toss a little olive oil on top so it doesn't stick to the bottom, and that'll give us a little kind of flavor too on the back end. I'm going to close it up with some saran wrap that I have sprayed with just a little bit of cooking oil. And we'll cover it for 2 hours and let it rise and see what happens. Okay. All right, so our dough has been sitting for about 2 hours, and I've lightly floured a surface, and as you can see, boy, that has really gotten a lot of rise out of it. We've got these nice like big bubbles, and this is going to be a really nice pair of Chicago style pizza dough balls. And so as I'm getting ready to work with it, you know, I just cut it down the middle with my bench scrape, and I cut it into these 2 pieces, and I'll form it into a ball. So again, you take your strands like this, strands like that. Okay, and then I just pinch it underneath the bottom and form that nice kind of ball shape. You want to be gentle with this. If you want to go for a second rise here, you can let this stuff sit for another 15 minutes. That'll give you a little bit more airiness, but it's not absolutely essential. So we will use this dough ball to make our pizza, and then this one we're going to store. So when I'm storing my dough, you can store this in the refrigerator for up to about 2 or 3 days. And so to store that, all you're going to do is just get like a Ziploc bag or some kind of plastic bag, spray your cooking oil in there, and then plunk your dough ball that you don't want to use for today in there, and then you just want to squeeze out all of the air, and then you pop that nice little guy in the fridge, and you can have Chicago pizza in a couple of days if that's what you want. Other than that, let's get started on forming, shaping, and then topping this beautiful Chicago style pizza.